So Agile is very much alive in the med device world. Wouldn't you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, Device Talks this week, we heard a lot about the need for transparency, for inspecting, for adapting, all those agile concepts applied in the medical device industry.
Welcome to the Agility in Real Life podcast, Take Five in Real Life. Now your hosts, Mike Stuedemann, Jeff Lee, and Pat Campbell.
Welcome to this episode of Take Five IRL, a podcast brought to you by Agility IRL, Agility in Real Life. I'm Mike Stuedemann, one of the partners at Agility IRL, and I'm joined by one of my other partners, Jeff Lee. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We just spent a better part of a week together in Boston, along with our third partner, Pat Campbell, who's enjoying a much-deserved day off today. But it seemed like a good time for us to reflect on what we saw and heard and pass it on to people at Device Talks in Boston.
Yeah, DeviceTalks Boston, one of the major medical device conferences in the United States. So, Jeff, maybe we'll start out. Let's just kind of talk about some broad themes industry-wise that we saw. A couple of things that stood out to me from some of the presentations. And obviously, I'm looking at this through the lens of being an agilist, but a lot of the speakers talked about the importance of the customer, the importance of physician, the importance of the patient voice in development. Now, that's always been the case, but as an agilist, that kind of warmed my heart to say that we're putting the customer at the center of things and continuing to remind ourselves to put the customer at the center of things.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that comes out in conversations because it's not always direct, right?
Right.
It's people who are, and we heard a number of presentations around this of interesting ways of doing things that are, they're not new, but it's a kind of an interesting way to go about getting some of that feedback, getting continual feedback, not locking in on your design or execution,
Sure.
knowing that things change and the rate of change, of course, came up a lot.
Absolutely. Well, and along those lines, and I know for our listeners of this podcast, this is going to come as no surprise, but the pace of change, things like geopolitical concerns, supply chain concerns, a lot of the med device leadership is starting to talk about, surprise, surprise, rapid iteration, parallel development of not only therapy development, but also the study of the therapy, and needing to execute very, very quickly so that that pace of change doesn't overwhelm your product development effort.
Yeah, we did a recent episode exactly around that continual discovery bit, and I like the way you phrase that as far as I can't remember what you said now, but I liked it. But
Good,
the
good.
implementing at the same time you're studying, right? You can't separate these things anymore.
Yeah, I think, and don't groan here, and those of you that are listening, don't disconnect. But of course, AI was also a big topic.
Oh, you heard AI?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Oh,
Yeah. And in fact, I think you owe me. I said when we walked on the exhibition floor, I think I told you I wanted $1 for every booth that mentioned AI. And I'd be able to afford, I think, a very nice dinner if I was counting right. Obviously, precision medicine's there, but I think like a lot of domains, med device is still struggling with how do we actually do this and how do we do it in a regulated way.
mhm. Yeah, no,
Although
absolutely true.
Yeah, well, but talk a little bit about some of the software vendors we saw that I think are starting to use AI to really help with the documentation side. I know you had a couple that you thought were pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's fun to see where the tools are going to support really what we've been coaching with TIR 45 in regulated software specifically, but also more broadly than software as well, to map all the aspects of your design controls in a single place without having to re-implement all your tool sets, right? Something that can aggregate what you're doing in different places, and then use AI to call out where are we inconsistent? Where does our traceability matrix fall down? Where do we say that we've implemented requirements, but we haven't shown any examples of how we've implemented those requirements? I've complained about that in the past where we get to the end of a big project and we have to go and reconcile what we actually built from our requirements document that was signed off 9 months before, right? The tools are able to do that for us if we implement them in a good way.
Yeah, so certainly some promise I think AI enabled features in some of the tools,
Hmm.
and I don't think this is going to be a spoiler alert for anyone listening, but you still need the people to do it, and you can't just buy a tool and walk away.
No,
Uh,
that was one of the big things that I got out of it, right? Is these tools are very well, they're going to do a great job of supporting if you are doing a what we like to call a sum of the parts model of documentation, where you do little bits of documentation as you go. It gets reflected in the tools. You
Sure.
can see that everything makes sense and is cohesive together. And then at the end, rather than having some big Word document, you're just using these tools to produce your design history file.
Right.
And so it's pretty slick, but it requires you to work in a certain way. And so you can't just plug it into your existing process if you haven't overhauled your QMS to be iterative supportive, shall we say. So
Yeah,
the good
it's
news I took from that is there's still a role for us here in helping organizations to get the mindset. I talked to some of those tool vendors and they're focused on the tools and implementing the tools, and it makes sense. That's their core business. But organizations oftentimes are going to need more support to really take advantage of the promise of those tools.
Yeah, it's the quote that our former business partner Jim Ruprecht is now retired is fond of saying, purpose, process, technology. You still have to have the process piece figured out. You
Hmm.
can't just implement one of those tools. Well, let's get to what was my favorite presentation. One of my business partners, Jeff Lee, actually presented with one of our clients from Smith and Nephew on the work that you were doing. And he's not going to tell you this, listener, so I will. It was the best attended session in that particular engineering theater. So the number one spot.
Yeah, and I will say that so part of the reason for I think people showed up is because we weren't just telling them about our solution. We did a case study with our clients. Sandeep Thakur from Smith and Nephew was there with me and talking about what we did and what were the trials and tribulations and where did we succeed, what is left to do, right? So it wasn't just a showcase for a tool or for a company. It
Right.
was real life. So we got some great questions on those. And it was interesting. I found a couple of themes really resonated with people. The biggest one was around the the idea that you can't just go and say fix that team and everything's better, right?
Yeah, film at 11. Fixing the team isn't going to cure the organization. Right.
Right, right. And we see it all the time when we'll have a conversation with leaders and they're like, yeah, I want you guys to come in. We got to get these teams performing better. And you can do that and you can see some small improvements there, but fundamentally you have to attack the system as well. And in the med device space, that usually means updating your quality management system. And so, we talked extensively about how we went about doing that, getting people on a common understanding of what's possible using Agile to deliver a FDA um, regulated product and get aligned on what can be. One of the things that Smith and Nephew did is they created an iterative design control procedure, a new SOP to actually manage that work.
Well, and I think the attendance at your session and the questions, I think you and Sandeep were answering questions a good 20 minutes after the session was over,
Yeah.
which is, testament to both your abilities as speakers, but also the subject matter. I think, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic here on this episode, which is unusual for me, as you know. But maybe we're over the pushback that we normally get of, but we have to do a stage gated process. The FDA says.
Hmm.
Maybe we're starting to see that break down a little bit, and people at least being open, our Scrum value of openness, at least being open to the
Right.
idea that you can do it in an iterative fashion.
Yes. And for the record, in case anyone wanted to take Mike's comment the wrong way, the FDA does not say you have to do a stage gated process. They just don't. It's not there. Um, so yeah. And if you like supporting information, feel free to reach out. So, Mike, what
Jeff,
else? What were
so before we move forward, Jeff will be more than willing to have those conversations. Sorry, what other takeaways from being on the big stage?
No, no, that was kind of all on the big stage. I did want to just transition us a little bit to the hallway conversations, right? The
Sure.
booth conversations or just meeting people. What were some of the key takeaways for you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of openness to new technologies. As you know, DeviceTalks Boston was paired with the Robotics Summit. So a lot of robotics people coming over asking about whether Agile is applicable to hardware.
Hmm.
Spoiler alert, it is. I thought those were good. A lot of people talking about pace of change, both from a technological perspective, societal perspective. Those were a couple of common themes for me. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it was the old problem of silos and communication. And it would come out in different ways. Oftentimes I'd be talking to someone and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting that you guys do that. We don't need that. We're pretty good." And then you keep talking to them and you realize that they have organizations that don't talk to each other and quality gets involved late. And the PMO doesn't seem to be aligned with the R&D technical folks and all those kinds of things that are like, you know what, guys, this is what we're talking about. The agile processes can break down those silos, right? We're getting people to
Absolutely.
talk to each other, get building transparency. It doesn't mean you have to run in 2 week sprints where you get all the way done. To your point about the hardware side of things, you do it a little bit differently, but fundamentally, what you're doing is building that transparency in the organization, as we mentioned in the open.
Well, and we had some, we talked to some early stage med device companies that I think by their very nature are agile, but they're starting to get to the point where they're like, all right, we got to get ready for FDA submission. How do we set up our processes to show the FDA that we're in control?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which, what's better than breaking down a silo? Not building a silo in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, get started right, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up this lengthy episode, any key takeaways for our listeners from your perspective, Jeff?
I would think if you haven't been to a conference in a while, go to one. Yeah, like honestly, it's one of those things, and I've always had this in mind that I think the first few years in my career, I would go to conferences and everything I learned, everything I heard was new. We get to a point where not everything is new. But if you can go to a conference and walk away with two or three things that are going to influence how you work going forward, or give you a new way to think, or even new tools to investigate, it's time worth it. And it's cool if sometimes you can see crazy robots like the Boston Dynamics dogs that were there on display.
Yeah, I would second that. Go out. I just really enjoyed talking to clients, potential clients about what some of their problems are. I enjoyed being able to connect what we fundamentally believe at Agility IRL around teams, around iteration, with some of the challenges that med device is facing. And then, how can you not feel good about hearing about the impact that you have on patients? There
Oh
were
yeah, absolutely.
a number of great stories shared both in the sessions and just in hallway conversations and small groups as well.
Hmm.
So, a couple of shout outs here. Certainly want to shout out Sandeep for presenting. Great presentation. Sandeep, appreciate you presenting. Carrying Jeff once. I mean, not carrying Jeff, presenting with Jeff. Sorry. We'll edit that piece out, Jeff.
Whatever gets it done.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Alicia, our
Hmm.
just recently, our most recent marketing intern who has moved on, but she came back and joined us for the show. The Queen of Notebooks. She handed out a record
She
number of
handed out
notebooks.
many notebooks
Yeah.
and got involved in great conversations too. She's definitely absorbed things over the years.
Yeah, she's definitely going far. I want to give a shout out to my friend Saul at Outcome Rocket who had me on the podcast during the conference there. That was a fun session with him and his team member Alexis. It was awesome. And really a shout out to all of the people that work at Device Talks. It was a great conference.
Very good conference. Agreed.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Take Five IRL. As Jeff plugged earlier, if you have any questions on the FDA, on med device, and how agile techniques can be applied, don't hesitate to reach out. And we hope that you'll join us on future episodes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Take Five IRL podcast. If you like it, please go ahead and share it with someone, as well as like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Also, leave us a comment or a suggestion for a future episode. Again, thanks for listening, and we look forward to you joining us next time on the Take Five IRL podcast.